The problem is we do not know the long term consequences of being on these drugs for long periods of time, and that's we have to wait and see. I have been in anti-obesity drug development since the beginning of the 90s, and I've worked on drugs that came and went, and they went because well, they went because they weren't particularly effective and patients disengaged with them, but they also went because of side effects, be they cardiovascular or behavioural, So there's always that notice of caution. I've seen so many false dawns. Now, this does seem sustainable, I have to say.
Welcome to the Wellness Report. I'm Susan Owens. Today, we will be speaking with the news the UK has become the first country in Europe to approve daily weight loss pill that can act as a treatment for life for managing weight and reversing type 2 diabetes. Orforglipron Pro, made by the US firm Lilly, will be sold under the brand name Foundayo. It helps people lose 12% of body weight on average, and trials show that it is an effective long-term maintenance tool to stay healthy. Joining me today is Professor Jason Halford from the European Coalition for People Living with Obesity and the World Obesity Federation. So what exactly is this new medication and how does it work?
This new medication is what we call a small molecule form of GLP-1 agonist. Now, until recently, we've had with the injectables, we've had to use actual peptides, which means that they are biologically active, they need to be chilled, they can only be stored for so long, and you can inject them originally once a day, now once a week with these things. So it's a bit of a hassle, but you can then work on a way of perhaps getting that peptide in a tablet, which is the next generation, which is what Novo Nordisk did. But this one is a small molecule, so it's very much more like a conventional medical approach.
Right, so is it kind of more like a more convenient way of delivering something that we know
Much,
already
much more
works?
convenient. It's not more effective. In fact, it's probably going to be slightly less effective than the injectables. It's the sheer convenience which makes this drug particularly important, because compared with its rival, one by Novo Nordisk, which needs to be taken at a certain time of day in a fasted state, this one can be taken any time of day, whether you've eaten or not.
And so the reports are saying that this will help people lose about 12% of body weight on average. Is 12% enough to make a pathway for meaningful health benefits? And how does that 12% compare to Monduro injections, for example?
12%. I would say, if you'd offer somebody 12% 10 or 15 years ago in terms of a pharmaceutical, they'd take your arm off. I mean, that
Yeah.
was, that's really good. We were getting between 5 or 10% with current available obesity pharmacotherapies, and many of them were withdrawn because of side effects as well. So they weren't particularly safe drugs, as it transpired as well. So 12% is quite reasonable. I mean, you start seeing health benefits at 5%. So anything
Wow.
beyond 5% weight loss, sustained weight maintenance, already starts conferring health benefits. So it is clinically significant, and certainly it's going to be noticeable. People living with obesity on the drug are going to notice this.
Mm.
Obviously, you have to start the drug down at a very low level and titrate up to the full dose before you'll start seeing the meaningful effects. And that titration is there because there are side effects associated with drugs, such as nausea, constipation, diarrhea, lots of gastrointestinal ones. And obviously, to reduce the effect, the impact of those, they slowly increase the drug to see if you can tolerate it, and if you can't, they'll drop the drug down a bit and then try dose escalating again. So it'll take a time to get to the point where you're getting sufficient uh, drug to see that 12% occur, which is one of the problems with all these treatments, is this dose escalation. But yeah, it will be noticeable. It's not as noticeable as 20% plus, which you're seeing on some of the very new injectables, or the 15 to 20% you saw with the original injectables.
There are also like gummy variants of this, which I know kind of comes up a lot in the supplement industry, is that you can now have everything in a gummy form. Is that even less so effective than the pill
I'm
or
not aware of this in a gummy form. I think
Oh.
any oral delivery. Well, there's lots of mimics and things out there as well. I think any oral delivery will probably produce very similar outcomes. I mean, a gummy, you're chewing it in your mouth a little bit longer. It's
Yeah.
actually it getting across from the gastrointestinal system into your bloodstream, which is the critical thing.
Right. Okay. So yeah, it could be the same then. So is it similar? I know that the different medications, like say like SSRIs and stuff, when you stop taking them, there can be like a withdrawal kind of effect. Is there any kind of element of that within the GLP ones, and especially the pill, the new pill that has come in?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any treatment. If you stop taking it, you lose the benefit. And I think one of the
Mm.
problems we have is obviously people are going to be taking these for so long because they're approved for only a certain period of use. And then what happens after they come off the drug is the issue. You do see some weight regain. And I think one of the problems is if we can use a drug in conjunction with work on eating behavior, on
Yeah.
activity, on psychological issues, then when people come off the drug, they'll be a little bit more prepared. But if we're using the drug instead of providing that more holistic approach to obesity, yeah, I think weight regain will be a big problem.
Yeah, because I feel with a lot of people, you would think that once they reach a healthy weight, like they could just hopefully stop. But yeah, it's kind of unless you've kind of incorporated how other ways, I suppose, to get rid of the food noise and then, healthy exercise and stuff to go alongside it, it might be a bit difficult. Do you think that there's kind of a potential that we're creating almost like a generation of people who need these drugs indefinitely? And do we have enough kind of research on them to know what happens if you take them for like 10 or 20 years at a time?
Yeah, well, obesity is a chronic disease. It's a lifelong chronic relapsing disease. So people are going to need support with their weight management throughout their life. Whether it is being on a single drug over their life, I suspect that's a bit unsustainable. But, as we have more treatment options, depending on where you are with the weight management or your weight management journey, you might consider differing options as you go through. It might be things are effective for a while but become less effective. We don't know what the long term efficacy of these drugs are. It might be that you need to switch drugs. It might be that you need a non-pharmacological approach. It might mean in severe cases actually you might have to consider bariatric surgery. We don't know, I think, is we
Yeah.
don't have that long-term data, as you've said.
Absolutely. And when you see people that are kind of in the, I guess, the preferred range of BMI, do you think, they take it for maybe cosmetic reasons or a self-esteem? Do you think we'll be in a situation where they're prescribed a GLP-1?
We can be rather judgmental of people live with obesity. I think it's all about cosmetic reasons, and obviously people want to look good, people want to look great. But the major motivation for people living with obesity is things like their health,
Yeah.
and also living long enough and well enough to enjoy relationships and children and grandchildren and things like that. So cosmetic weight loss. We all, have self-esteem. We all have a body image, and those are
Yeah.
important to all of us. But I think, particularly when you're dealing with severe obesity, it's literally things like health and mobility. Living with obesity, particularly severe obesity, has a real big impact on your quality of life, and it's that improvement in quality of life people are really looking for.
And there's also kind of I guess like a psychological barrier I think that comes with the idea of injecting yourself. There's obviously people who are afraid of needles, but even
Yeah.
just it feels like such a serious step forward, I think, to take that step to go, yeah, I'm going to inject myself with this medication. So do you think that people have been hesitant to try it and have really needed it? Could we now see this like maybe even like millions of more people will like be willing to take this next step into GLP-1s now?
Well, in terms of patients prescribed this through general healthcare settings and systems, many of those will have other diseases, including diabetes, so they would have been used to injecting. But obviously, when these things came on the market, you could get them through private prescription. So as long as you met the weight status criteria, which was a fairly low BMI above 30 compared with what you'd get through healthcare systems, I think people were making decisions: should I go for it or not? Because it's injecting yourself is a bit of a stressful experience for people who've never
Yeah.
done it before. If you're type 2 diabetes, you probably may have done it before. If you've got other diseases, you may have done it before. So I think, yes, that is a big barrier for some people. But in the UK, we reckon about 2.5 million people are using the injectables already. So it's clearly wasn't a barrier for them.
Do you think this will kind of change how we view obesity and treat it in the long term? Like, do you think the next generation or like the younger generation now will just see GLP-1s as quite like a normal, natural thing that comes about when you're treating obesity. Whereas like for us, it was quite now you can inject yourself. It was almost like a
Yeah.
fear mongering kind of around how GLP-1s were given out to people.
I think there's a number of concerns, or there was a number of concerns, and some of them
Yeah.
are perhaps long-standing. I think one of the concerns is that just everybody would use a drug, everyone would just, slam into the drug, and all other aspects of weight management would disappear. And we've already talked about how actually you need to be dealing with eating behavior, your relationship with food,
Mm-hmm.
issues around coping with food, emotional eating, things like that, and also basic changes in lifestyle, and also addressing issues around activity and exercise as well. And I think it's important that that isn't knocked out of the weight management space, because you need all of it. The drug doesn't replace this. And I think there's been a bit of naivety around the fact that the drug is just replacing that. I think the other probably concern people have as well is the discourse around them. They were called skinny jabs and things like that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it rather trivialized. So I think we went through a period of trivializing them without understanding the nature of obesity or the struggles that people have and how these can play a role in people managing their weight. I think we see some impressive mean or average weight losses with these drugs, be it 10%, 15%, 20%. Well, it's important to point out there's a great deal of variation in those clinical trials. Some people are not responding to these drugs at all. Some people are hyper responders. They're losing much more than the 20%. Do you see what I mean? And I think that
Yeah.
shows that we're dealing with obesities and individuals' issues with their weight, which are diverse. And so, again, this assumption that the drugs will just replace it, well, they don't, because the drugs don't necessarily work for everybody. And what we do not know is if we move a patient from one drug to the other, does that increase the likelihood of the drug working, or are they just not responsive to all drugs because they've got an issue which is not around appetite regulation, or improving appetite regulation doesn't solve?
A lot of the concern, I think even I would have felt, would be kind of this idea of like private companies. Because I mean, I grew up in kind of an era where it was influencers promoting like skinny teas and all these kind of things, and like
Yeah,
just these very random products that scientifically actually did nothing. And then you see a lot with the supplement industry. You can, gummies that'll help your hair go long and all these kind of things.
yeah,
And I think when private companies then got involved, and you do see a lot of advertising for private companies that are giving out GLP-1s to people, it does kind of create this, like, I guess, this apprehension around it. And I think it just, I guess, had bad PR at the start. But the more we see it coming around, do you think it kind of takes away a lot of, I guess, the pressure that would be on, say, like the NHS and things to deal with obesity
I mean,
down the line?
ideally, the support should be available through the NHS and through, because
Absolutely.
obesity is a disease, and actually managing obesity actually leads not only to benefits on an individual basis, and reducing burden on the overall healthcare system. It actually has a potentially an economic benefit. I know people in the Treasury are quite keen on these drugs because it improves economic productivity of the working population of the UK. So there is kind of that sort of side to things. So I think more availability through the NHS. Yes, I don't think the NHS will be able to fund everybody's obesity drugs. I don't think everybody needs drugs for all will benefit from drugs for living with obesity as well. As I mentioned, not everybody responds, but the private providers are filling a gap, and we need to look at what services they are providing, to make sure that they are at least supporting people living with obesity with advice on diet, with advice on exercise, and appropriate support in terms of directing people to any necessary psychological support that they need as well. I mean, I think moving forward, a lot of healthcare is going to be a mix of online and face to face. Anyway, the NHS is turning more like that as well. Using apps as well to monitor patients. So I think there's going to be a lot of convergence of these different types of approaches to weight management, and hopefully, the NHS has got a big challenge in terms of these drugs are becoming available, they are becoming approved, but they do not have the staff trained in obesity management. or
Right.
having conversations about obesity. So we're facing, I think, actually an amazing challenge of actually, the drugs companies are doing their best to support the NHS in rolling out these drugs. Certainly, there's government funding behind it, but the staff and the services are not there. They're not prepared, sufficiently prepared to handle this, and that's, I think, going to be one of the big problems we face, certainly in the UK.
Did you find a lot through your work that there's a lot of people that aren't trained to deal with obesity? Like, I wouldn't have said that obesity is kind of a new, you know, thing that's come around.
Barely
Like,
think
is it surprising to see
it
that?
barely it is barely covered in medical degrees. Doctors get a little bit of
Wow.
nutrition, barely covered in medical degrees, and because it's only disease states to talk about, and traditionally obesity has been seen as a behavioural problem or a public health problem, and not people didn't
Right.
understand the biology behind obesity. So we have a lack of training, and it's not just doctors; it's other healthcare professionals as well. And we
Mm.
need to do that, and particularly primary care doctors, who we could be first port of contact, but also in the UK, community pharmacists as well. I mean, they will need training. Practice nurses will need training. We've got specialised obesity centres dotted around the UK. They are
Right.
multidisciplinary. They have a good understanding of the disease, the diagnosis, how to stage people in terms of what direction you take them in treatment. We don't have that level of understanding or knowledge within primary care, who have to deliver on all sorts of disease states.
That is quite surprising, I suppose. Having not been in any way an expert myself, but it does genuinely just, I feel like we've been dealing with the epidemic coming for so long, and people have been concerned about it for like genuinely, I would say, my whole life. It is just surprising to see that it is still such a massive gap. But do you think that, looking ahead to it now, do you think that we'll look back at kind of today's use of GLP-1s and say that that was the breakthrough that was needed and changed everything about the obesity epidemic?
Potentially. We do not, as I
Mm.
say, we do not. I mean, there's more and more drugs under development, so the portfolio of drugs we get is going to be much broader, and our ability to produce it in small molecule form as well. Those may get more effective over time as well. So we're going to have a lot more to choose from, and that would be brilliant. And in essence, that will be fine.
Mm.
The problem is we do not know the long term consequences of being on these drugs for long periods of time, and that's we have to wait and see. I have been in anti-obesity drug development since the beginning of the 90s, and I've worked on drugs that came and went, and they went because, well, they went because they weren't particularly effective and patients disengaged with them, but they also went because of side effects, be they cardiovascular or behavioral, So there's always that notice of caution. I've seen so many false dawns. Now, this does seem sustainable, I have to say.
Mm.
This has been going on, a few years now, and it does appear like that, but there's always that note of caution in my mind. I've seen things come, so I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's a false dawn. I think we're in a very good position, but I'm not going to declare that in terms of pharmaceutical approaches to obesity, we've completely cracked it just yet. Let's see what
Yeah.
the long term shows us.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Susan.
That's all from us today at The Wellness Report. Subscribe down below for more interviews just like this one.